It's now my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the fabulous UCLA alumna, Jessie Kornberg. Now, Jessie graduated from UCLA just 12 years ago in 2007, and what she's done since then is pretty amazing. And so I hope that all of you sitting and watching and thinking about your own professional lives, imagine where you'd like to be 12 years from now. Because you know those things I talked about a few minutes ago, GPS, right? Gratitude, purpose, and service. They're words. They're important words. They're the kind of words that people say at places like this, at commencement, at graduation. But they also capture, truly and deeply, the life and the choices that our commencement speaker has made since she graduated. She is currently the president and CEO of Bethesda, one of the nation's leading public interest and social justice nonprofits. There, for the last 5 years, she's overseen dozens of attorneys, advocates, and volunteers, including UCLA law students and graduates, at a public interest org that gives free legal services to seniors, children, families, immigrants, low-wage workers, tenants, people fleeing violence or human trafficking, and so many others who are vulnerable and in need. And the work that she and her colleagues do has a profound impact. It is felt on the streets and households across this great city and beyond. Now, Jessie took the helm at Bethesda after working as a litigator at Bird Manila, where she won major court cases and chaired the pro bono program. Before that, she was the executive director of Ms. JD, the group that she co-founded here as a law student at UCLA Law to advance the interests of women in law. And Jessie is a deeply engaged and wonderful graduate of this alma mater and regularly does come back to mentor others, to participate in discussions. She's helped to create UCLA Law Women Lead, and she's also been involved in my board of advisors, and I've counted on her wisdom, good sense, and reflection more times than I can count. There's lots more that I could say about Jessie, but she truly does capture that sense of GPS I wanted you all to think about in your own lives. She's a lawyer and leader in the truest sense. And I'm just so honored not only to call her a friend of mine and a friend of the law school, but this year's commencement keynote. Please join me in welcoming Jessie Kornberg.
Thank you, Dean Mnookin. This is clearly the thrill of a lifetime. I can't believe you get to do this every year. I remember one moment from my graduation so clearly. In my family, we didn't engage in a lot of ceremony, and I had never walked in a graduation before, and it had never occurred to me to invite my parents to come to this one. I was in line, with my classmates outside of Dodd, getting my robe on and getting ready to walk in when my cell phone rang. My mom had driven through the night and was driving towards Westwood to get here to see me walk. Will I make it? Where do I go? We started walking in. I have no idea how or where she parked, but she ran and made a straight shot for me as we were processing, and I got the best bear hug of my life 20 yards in front of me 12 years ago. So before I say anything else, I want to give a shout out to the ride or dies, for the parents and the grandparents, the aunties and the siblings, the spouses and the families, the friends, the teachers, the counselors, the tutors, the ride or dies who show up for us even when we don't ask them to. We would not be here without them, and I am so grateful. They have seen you through 3 years of cold calls, heavy books, long nights, study groups, outlines, exams, internships, summer gigs, all the way to this moment. I know that they are proud of you. You have done brilliantly. I am so honored and proud to be here with you. Congratulations to the class of 2019. When I think back to that time in my life 12 years ago, I don't think as much about graduation as the weeks and months that followed and the experience of being a new, young lawyer. Have any of you been to court yet? Maybe? You will soon, I promise. And I will never forget the first time that I went to court. I was a baby lawyer. I had very little to do. I was given the assignment of appearing as a living, breathing person and a member of the bar at a status conference, at which my entire assignment would be to say my name correctly when asked to do so by the judge. That did not stop me from tying myself in knots of nerves. Where do I park? Where do I go? It was downtown here in Los Angeles at Stanley Moss Courthouse. If you haven't been there, it's a bit of a zoo. There are 200 courtrooms at Moss, and each one of them could have a couple of dozen matters on the docket on any given day. So the halls are packed. Everybody is rushing. Everybody seems to know where to go except for me. Where do I put my business card? How do I sign in? Who am I supposed to let know that I'm here? Oh, no one cares. Okay. And so then you sit in the gallery and you wait for your docket number to be called. And so I'm sitting there shuffling my papers and trying to review how to say my name correctly when called. And at some point I realize that the morning's business has come to a halt. And the courtroom is silent but for the piercing cries of a woman who is seeking the help of the court and cannot get it. She does not speak the language. She does not have a lawyer. She does not know where to go. And none of us can seem to help her. Not the clerk of the court, not the judge, and none of us sitting silently staring down at our papers, hating our pinstripes, because we're helpless just like her. I don't know what brought her to the courthouse that day. I only know what we all knew, which was that she was terrified. At some point, the clerk escorted her out of the courtroom, and she sat in the hallway, no better off than when she had arrived. The business of the court resumed, and she continued to sit alone with her terror. I know that because I passed her on my way out of court that day. The feeling of walking past her, eyes down, avoiding, it's just about as bad as I've ever felt about myself or anything. And I remember thinking, this is not why I went to law school. When I was applying for law school, my father told me a story, and I should warn you now before I share it, almost all of my father's stories include a bad pun. This was from a trip he had made to Cleveland, Ohio. He was in the back of a cab, and as they were driving through downtown Cleveland, he asked the cab driver, "Is that the courthouse?" And you know, the cab driver said, "Mm-hmm, the Just Us building." Couple of minutes, you'll stand up, you walk across this stage, your name will be called out, and you'll accept a diploma. You'll become one of us. And every day, for the rest of your career, the question will be, is it just us? I hope that you can learn from my mistakes and do better than I did my first day out. It doesn't have to be just us. When you leave here today, I'm happy to tell you, you leave behind your last grade. It doesn't have to mean the end of learning, but it does mean the last time a professor defines what success will look like for you. It does mean the last time a professor will measure your performance against that definition of success. And it means that going forward, you set your own goalposts for victory. You could do it for the money. You could do it for the glory. You could do it for a cause. You could do it because it's interesting. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you never forget that the inherent ability you have to go out and decide how and why to practice law, that's a power conferred on you today by the dean. The Dr. Martin Luther King taught that power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting anything that stands against love. With your degree today, you have the power to turn the law into hope. I need you to do it. I need more hope that the law is not just for us. You don't have to go into legal aid like me. You don't even have to be a pro bono volunteer. All you have to do is in that moment where I failed, when faced with clear injustice, don't stand idly by. I know that it is scary to not know how to help. I know that. It doesn't mean you can't still try. Surely inaction in the face of injustice is a fate worse than failure. When you stand alongside those least served by our system, you help do something we all need. You don't necessarily guarantee their success, but you help us rebuild faith that we are part of a profession and a system that is not just for us, but open and fair and available. The threats to the rule of law are real. And I don't have to talk about the president. I'm talking about Los Angeles. I'm talking about we are here in a city where more people will be homeless tonight than any night before, and yet another 50,000 people will be in court this year in eviction proceedings, and less than 10% of them will have a lawyer. I'm talking about here in Los Angeles, the wage theft capital of America, where $26 million in earned wages are stolen from low-wage immigrant workers every week. What's the minimum wage if it doesn't apply to all of us? I'm talking about here in Los Angeles, where the single largest number of impoverished people live in this country, and we have the lowest rate of enrollment in public benefits of any county in the country. What good is the law if it's just for us? Who among you went to law school to graduate today only to perpetuate and not eradicate a just us kind of justice? Not me, not you, right? You give me hope because you can make it better. Let's go do it. I expect nothing less than greatness from you. Congratulations to the class of 2019.
Thank you, Ms. Kornberg. And as a token of appreciation, the class of 2019 would like to present you with this UCLA Law sweatshirt.
Thank you.
All right, back at it again. It is now my pleasure to introduce the JD class speaker. Yeah. Sarah Rahimi is a triple Bruin, earning her Bachelor of Arts in International Development Studies, her Master of Arts in Islamic Studies, and her JD, all right here at UCLA. While at law school, Sarah served as Chief Comments Editor of the UCLA Law Review and co-chair of the Muslim Law Students Association. She served as a legal extern for the ACLU of Southern California, summer law clerk for Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and as a legal intern for the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. In the fall, Sarah will begin her position as an associate with the law firm of Strice and Marr here in Los Angeles. Please welcome our JD speaker, Sarah Rahimi.
Thank you, Curtis. Dear fellow graduates, faculty members, staff, family, and friends, I'm so excited to see you all here today and so thankful for the opportunity to share some reflections. To our family, friends, faculty, and community members, thank you for joining us on this important day to mark the end of what has been a remarkable journey. I think I speak for all of us when I say we couldn't have done this without you. Your love, support, guidance, and faith in us carried us through these challenging 3 years. You are the giants whose shoulders we stand on. Thank you for all that you are and all that you do for us. As I reflect on our time in law school, I continue to be struck by the absurdity of the hand that we were dealt with and what we made of it. The world, when we started law school in the summer of 2016, was a different place. And not just because it was a happier time, because that was before we learned to worry about whether the commas and periods in our writing were italicized. No, that moment was also fundamentally different than the one we're graduating into, because we were the last class of law students to apply to and start law school before Donald Trump was elected. I remember the day after the election so clearly, not only because it showed me how quickly we were able to organize community and be there for one another, but also because it unmasked the fiction that neutrality was possible in the face of adversity. There were those of us crying in the courtyard, terrified of what was to come, and those chuckling nervously, wondering what was going on out there. There were those of us wondering if we could continue our education and stay in the country, and those celebrating the election results. We're the last class to start law school while Korematsu, the case ruling the internment of Japanese Americans unconstitutional, was still good law. And somehow, now that we're at the end of our time here, Korematsu is formally overturned, yet its ugly legacy of identity-based discrimination and white supremacy lives on and is perpetuated in the Muslim ban, which the Supreme Court managed to uphold in the same breath in which it overturned Korematsu. We are a generation that came of age as lawyers at a time of profound paradoxy and perplexity like this. We became lawyers at a time when the rule of law felt at risk constantly and tested endlessly. We were in constitutional law, studying the parameters of a doctrine that the administration seemed to be pushing every day. We were in administrative law, wondering what would remain of it. We were in federal courts and the Supreme Court clinic, wondering whether the government shutdown would last long enough to shut down the federal court system. We were in immigration law, watching in horror as the administration continued to separate families, put children in cages, and put people fleeing their homes into detention camps. We were in critical race theory, studying the currents of race, power, class, and privilege as they continue to shape the moment before our eyes. We were in law school when law itself was in peril. And if there was any profession to have lost hope in during this time, it would have been this one. But somehow, fellow graduates, you managed to do the opposite. You organized protests, helped translate for individuals affected by the Muslim ban, helped draft sanctuary city ordinances to ensure that residents of Los Angeles would be safe, raised thousands of dollars to provide legal aid, ran clinics to help the most vulnerable communities, organized against bad environmental policy, started student organizations for causes you believed in, such as justice for immigrants and voting rights, and even traveled across the border to help provide legal aid to migrants. Refusing to be intimidated by the adversity of the moment, you chose to put your talents, privilege, and hard work to use in the service of those who needed it the most. Refusing to just give up on one another, you decided to challenge each other and grow instead. Refusing to be passively shaped by the law and its trajectory, you decided to shape how it was to affect your communities and those it has made the most vulnerable. Refusing to bow to what you believed to be unjust conditions, you instead dared to hope, dared to remember what Dr. King reminded us of when he said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And in insisting on hope, you gave hope to those around you, including myself. One of my favorite classes in law school was constitutional law, not because of the subject matter, because, well, for the most part that's depressing, but because of the professor. Professor Wansowitz, along with Professor Colgan, is one of the best teachers I've ever had, and I'm convinced I wouldn't be here with you today if it wasn't for him. On the last day of our class, Professor Wansowitz gave us a beautiful pep talk that stayed with me all throughout law school. He ended his talk with a quote by one of his favorite painters, Picasso. And as I reflect on our time in law school, the absurd conditions that we are dealt with and what we made of it, I'm reminded of that quote. It says, "There are painters who transform the sun to a yellow spot, but there are others who, with the help of their art and their intelligence, transform a yellow spot into the sun." Fellow graduates, may you always continue to be those who, with the help of your art and your intelligence, transform yellow spots into suns. Thank you.